Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on our website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the conversation. And the email address, if you'd like to get in contact with us, is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. There's a podcast version of the show every Monday at 10 a.m. and you can get it from the platforms over on the other side of the screen there. Let's have a look at our first story of the week. And Zoopla have done their annual review of what we've all been searching for. I found this quite fascinating at times, and I think this is kind of like what's going to be going on in the market in 2025 as well. So let's just have a look at what they have to say about 2024 as we're getting to that time of the year. It's almost over once again. Zoopla has released its new browsing data relating to its platform over the last 12 months, revealing that January was the most popular month for visitors to the portal, followed by March and February. The heightened early year activity is fueled in part by the so-called Boxing Day bounce on the 26th of December and the New Year, which Zoopla says traditionally drives an increase in property searches as people start looking for a new home at the beginning of the year. This year, 2024, saw an increase in the popularity of floor plans on listings. Apparently, 80% of buyers head to the floor plan before looking at the photos, which I kind of find hard to believe, Joe. What's your thoughts on that? Because surely if you don't like the appeal of what the place looks like, I mean, I know the floor plan is probably the most important part, but it's particularly where it's located on the listing, it's not the first place I would have thought I would have gone to.
No, that's great. Yes, Zoopla always does its bit of research, and we do our own research as agents and auctioneers, obviously as to what the market's going to do and what the forecast is going to be, especially when you've had a new incumbent at number 10 over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. It always, they've had their honeymoon period, and they're going to be looking to see what that's going to bring for us in the new year. But going back to the floor plans, and of course, curb appeal in my book is number one. So I suppose the way they look at it is that the photograph already appears as the first appearance on any search. So if you look at a property, click on it, the first thing you're going to see is the photograph. And I suppose I always say it's the first 10 seconds of curb appeal, or 10 seconds of that photograph, that's probably going to move them straight onto the floor plans. If the photograph hasn't appealed to them, then they're probably not going to go to the floor plans. And the reason why they go to the floor plans is, I suppose, they start and already have a thought process in their mind of what that property's got to look like, what it's got to cater for within their own family structure, within their own sort of structure that they've been looking at, thinking about what it could be, whether it's a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studio, or a 3-bedroom semi-detached property, or a detached property. It's just about where they are in their own family structure, their own first-time buyers, their investment, what that area is going to be. And the reason why the floor plans, I suppose, have become paramount is just working out the flow of your home, and that is so important to have that flow right. And we've talked about that many times previously on our shows, to say that when you walk through that front door, once you're in it, you've got to create the space to show that you want to wear it, you want to walk through the rest of it, or you made your decision, this is already too small. So the layout of floor plans do play a good part in that.
Well, May was the most popular month to list a home in the year, according to Zoopla, with some of the most popular time of the year for house viewings and moves, while according to HMRC, August was the busiest month of the year for completions, with 104,740 property transactions completed in the UK with a value of £40,000 or more. Scottish areas have the speediest time to sell. The average time to sell was 33 days, down from 34 in 2023, with 3-bed semi-detached properties the most popular property type. No surprise there. Falkirk was the crown in the fastest moving property market in the UK, with a time to sell of just 15 days, followed by Glasgow at 16 and West Lothian at 17 days. All of the top 5 fastest moving markets are located in Scotland, where properties are listed with evaluation and survey up front, driving speedier agreements on sales. Liverpool was the fastest moving market in England and Wales, with a time of 19 days, followed by Manchester 23 days and London Borough of Waltham Forest 25 days. Quite interesting that Scotland, with that idea of having all the information up front, the survey and the valuation and all that sort of thing, just tends to speed things up.
Well, it's a discussion that's been ongoing, hasn't it, within our conveyancing system, and the Scottish system. That it's always been clearer that the time you made a bid in Scotland, you've pretty much committed to buying the property, and therefore you get the whole package thrown right in front of you to say, here you are. It's got every bit of information that you require, and subsequently you've got X, Y, Z time to conclude the matters. In a way, it's very similar to what we have in our auction world, where we have a legal pack ready and prepared so that somebody can make an informed decision and get on with it. There's absolutely no reason why such things don't exist within the conveyancing system. But the conveyancing system we know in the UK is always complicated within the legal system, because the legal system likes to spend its time going through every word, every sentence, and subsequently can make a huge delay. And therefore is archaic, Paul. We know that.
And the most important one that I always like to look at is the on-site searches, what people are looking for each year. And the number one search, as it was last year, is still for freehold. That's the number one thing people look for when they go on the site and they put in the search bar at the top. That's been there for the second year in a row. Garage still there at number 2, annex at number 3, no change there. But then cottage comes in, and what used to be there a year ago was acre. So interesting that people are maybe not looking for as much land now, but looking for something much more rural. Double garage is now in the next place, and then you've got rural pool, which I still find surprising. Acre's fallen down to near the bottom there, and conservatory has made a reappearance. I thought that, and we were led to believe, I thought earlier this year, that conservatories were a real no-no now.
Well, it just goes to show the points that they look at. Freehold, number one, is because of so much bad publicity, adverse leasehold situations. People just tend to think that, you know what, I'm going to buy and I want to buy freehold primarily because I'm in control and that's what we want to try and achieve. In terms of the others, for example, the garage and the conservatory are featuring in there because it allows more space. So there's always a consideration for space, isn't there? Garage normally doesn't nowadays house a garage. A car, it actually houses more of the tut that we all collect and think, oh yeah, let's just put it in the garage, and I might look at that one of these days, and then there it lies for the rest of its duration of life until the skip arrives. And so subsequently the garage is storage. Conservatory obviously reappears because it's probably a cheaper way of having another space added to your property. So people think of it in a logic way of what they want to see as time goes on. And of course, in searches, all of these things are important when you're buying your home.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that Sea View has dropped out of the rankings this year. So maybe I'm not sure if that's because most of the coast is disappearing into the sea, or whether that's actually the fact that they can't afford to buy them on the coast. What's your thoughts?
Well, if you looked out in sea view over the last 24 hours, you will actually realize why you probably don't really want the sea view. But that is probably a tiny percentage. Or I think sea view is very popular, but sea view is popular with a certain age bracket, certain time of life. Where you ultimately want to be. So those that have been in the city take a view on properties like coastal ones for a sea view, and also retirement, and also the fresh air, and as a second home. But of course, we know that the second home is being beaten up at the moment through stamp duty process, and so subsequently, sea view is probably dropped off the Richter scale because they can't afford to go there at the moment. It's better to perhaps go and do an Airbnb and live the idea and not own the one.
New entries in the top 100 are interesting this year. In Need of Modernisation, which has moved up a huge 134 places to 53rd in the list, and Study, which moved up 22 places and now ranks only 88th. I would have thought Study would have been a lot higher than 88th. But In Need of Modernisation, I guess that's people looking for a bargain, isn't it?
Well, need of modernization is not just about a bargain. It's about putting your own mark on the property that you want to buy. So, where possible, people do feel that a doer-upper or one that needs modernizing is one that you might, find it as slightly cheaper. But you have to also bear in mind that the amount of money is going to cost to actually do those types of property up is got to also be considered. So I think in the mindset, it's more about I want to do this and I want to do it my way. So therefore, what can I buy that I can actually go and put my own stamp on? I think is why the doer upper or the in need of modernization goes up. We also know as agents that a property that comes in that looks like it needs a little bit of love and care will also generate a lot of interest in general anyway, not just from DIY enthusiasts but from all sorts really. As I said, I think the fundamental reason really is that they want to buy it so that they can actually add value to it, put their own mark, do the things the way they want to do it themselves.
They also released the most expensive and cheapest local authorities to purchase a home in 2024, according to Zoopla, of course. Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, no real surprise there. It retains the crown as the most expensive local authority in the UK, with an average house price of 1.132 million, which is 10 times more expensive than the cheapest local authority in Inverclyde, which has an average house price of 105,800. As far as the UK is concerned, Blackpool is the least expensive property local authority to buy a property in, followed by Sunderland, Burnley, Middlesbrough, and North Ayrshire, Hull, Hartlepool, West Dunbartonshire, East Ayrshire, and then at the top of that list, Inverclyde. So, not surprisingly, all of that in the north, but I notice Elmbridge and South Bucks get in there with all the other London boroughs.
Yes, I mean, again, in terms of the London boroughs, all around the commuter stockbroker belt, around the M25, for example, they're all very, very popular for many things. One of them is communication. I always say that communication is a huge player, and that's not picking up the phone saying, hello, it's me as a communication. What I'm talking about is accessibility, accessibility by road, by rail. And by air. So, for example, if you look at places like Buckinghamshire and Berkshire and Surrey, they're all, abutting places like Heathrow Airport, Gatwick, Stansted. So, accessibility to fly in and out of the country, to have access on the road, and train stations, etc. All of those things, and on top of all of that, of course, schooling is very, very important. And of course, if you're looking to step as a young family into a property and you can work from home and you don't need to be in the south, then of course the north is very appealing when you look at some of those properties starting at around £100,000 plus. For a 3-bedroom property, it's a huge opportunity for young families to start something anew there.
In the rental market, it's Kensington and Chelsea at the top again, with an average rent of £3,518 per calendar month, which is triple the UK average of £1,270. And Hartlepool in County Durham is the cheapest, where you can get a rental for £564 per calendar month, followed by the Scottish local authorities of Dumfries and Galloway at 571 and East Ayrshire at 579. So, I mean, it is extraordinary, whether it's the prices or the rentals. The gap is just enormous. It seems to be getting bigger. This whole thing about levelling up doesn't seem to have done much good, does it?
Oh, levelling up was just, never going to happen. There was no energy behind it in the right places. And I don't think any one of them will rethink about it. That it's where the popularity is. Even as youngsters, young children, teenagers and above, young adults, they want to be where there is buzz, there is life, good restaurants, clubs, pubs, even though the pubs are dying in most of the areas, but in the cities, they are still popular as spots to socialize, network, and party. So they want to be in the bars. They want to be where the bright lights are, and that will never ever change really, because once you're in the rural, you just to travel alone can kill the journey. So I mean, I speak to many people, as you know, over the years have done so, and it's always things like, for example, I don't want to drive there because it's going to cost me, and I can't leave my car there, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do. So they talk themselves out of, leaving where they are. But those that once they leave and go to the bright lights, will say, well, actually, I'm not going to go back. So that leveling up, that sort. We both got kids, and at a time in their life, you try and ask one of your kids to say that you want to sit in the middle of, I don't know. Wiltshire on a rural street, the chances are they were going, well, you stay there, Dad. I'm off to London. That's what's going to happen, because that's where they want to be. So we were all there, and that's the way. So leveling up is really not going to take place as we'd like it to, unless they start to build, literally new cities, new towns, providing all of those things in other parts of the country.
And that's, of course, another point about stamp duty, because you've got one size fits all for stamp duty criteria for levels that once you go a price above certain levels, then obviously you're going to pay your stamp duty, and it goes up and up and up and up. But that's when you look at those prices, 105,800. I mean, it's going to be difficult for anybody to get on the ladder for paying any stamp duty, and yet down in the south, everybody is being punished.
Well, yes, because the revenue, the treasury does extremely well from the south, in terms of stamp duty. I mean, it's just colossal amount of money that they get, because it's the old adage here, Paul, of supply and demand, isn't it? The demand is huge, the supply is limited, but because the demand is so huge, and there is not enough property, people will pay the higher prices, and that means they pay higher stamp duty, and so that will never ever. It hasn't changed. I mean, I've done 45 years. We know that the statistics have shown for the last 50 years that house prices have either stopped in neutral or gone forward more times than they've ever gone backwards, and the likelihood of them ever going back in a hurry is, even now. Look at the stats where we are, and we've gone through all sorts of increases of interest rates, stamp duty changes, all those things that continue, but it's resilient because the demand is always there, and the supply in the brighter areas like London, Manchester, all of those areas where there is employment opportunity, communication, good transport links, etc., will continue to sustain.
I mean, must be some really good bargains when you think about it, because at the end of the day, salaries are not 10 times higher in London than they are in Inverclyde, for example, and yet the house prices are 10 times lower in Inverclyde than they are in London. So, even if your salary is half what you'd get in London, you're still getting a great deal because your house price is a tenth of what it is in London.
It's true, but it's the case of saying that, is that where I want to be? So it's a good step for first time buyers, young families, especially now. The industry has changed. The world of communication and the world of work now is all about deliveries. You think about how many deliveries are being done. So therefore, companies that are providing deliveries of food, Tesco's, all of these people are now providing home deliveries, so you can do that from pretty much anywhere. And if that allows you to have that kind of a job, which you're happy to do, then you're happy to also move further afield and you get good value for money. But those that are in the city or in London or towards the south have obviously got, support from the bank of mum and dad, and also because their properties have actually gone up, and also the fact that their income is perhaps slightly higher.
Let's just talk about the portals for a second in a more general sense, Joe. Let's just look at how they've changed our buying behaviour. I mean, I've been through the process, as we've discussed on here just recently, and I found it a very, very different experience from when I last bought, which was in 2000. So therefore, we didn't have portals. We still had our newspapers, which we've lovingly discussed before on the show, and miss greatly, I'm sure. But it is interesting, isn't it? Because you can literally, I mean, it's hugely addictive to start with. I mean, I was finding I was on there 5, 6, 7 hours a day at one point looking for properties and trying to work out, as you said earlier on, whether the flow would work and all that kind of thing. And then it came to booking in appointments, and literally the first one we went to, because that was the one that we thought was the most likely, was the one we ended up buying. So literally you can do all of your browsing, whereas I remember in 2000 I was visiting a dozen properties and then going, oh no, this one isn't going to work. Because obviously I hadn't had the benefit of what the internet can give me through these portals. So presumably there's been a massive change, but is that, from your perspective as an agent and an auctioneer, has that been a negative, do you think, for people in your position, or a positive?
Well, it has both. There's two halves to that. There's a positive because of the number of eyeballs now actually on their smartphones available to research and look for on the move, which is what the portals have done. The obviously from a touchy-feely point of view, there was always that need for the newspaper that has now surpassed its life, even though we still feel that people want to. I mean, you still find that people go and buy the Sunday Times, for example, or the Mail on Sunday, or those kind of papers because they want to go through the broadsheets, they want to go through the paper and read it verbatim and have that feel. But in terms of property, what's happened is that you have so much more data, so much more information now available on the portals. And so subsequently the portals killed the papers. It's about a personal thing. But whilst we miss the papers, quite honestly, that was always good to see. I remember, in my neighbourhood, the property news was, the paper to be. It was full of lots and lots of properties. It came through on late on a Wednesday night. It was dropped off as a bundle outside our office. And in the early hours of Thursday morning, we know that it was ripped out and people were taking their bunches of papers towards where their work was because their colleagues wanted a copy of it, etc. It was a different flow. Now, it's not the case, primarily because everybody has it at their fingertips. Like you said, you spent nearly 5 hours. It's addictive. You can sit there going through from one point to another, to another, to another. So, it's a different thing. But the answer is that there's more eyeballs online on portals than there was ever before, and that's what's changed the game.
Zoopla are quite optimistic in terms of 2025 because that's partly what the report is about. Is they're looking at an uptick in sales from 1.1 million this year to 1.5 million homes next year. They're saying that the houses will grow in value by 2.5% in 2025. But there is one that's assuming with interest rates staying, presumably very near to where they are now or slightly lower. But there is the one fly in the ointment, of course, and that is this stamp duty change that's going to happen in April. And they're saying there could be, as there was the last time, obviously everyone was rushing through January, February and March to get their deals through to beat the deadline. But then you get this drop off a cliff in April when nothing happens because everybody's been busy for the previous 3 months. I know you seem to think that there's going to be a moratorium on that and maybe they won't change it. But if they do you think we're going to go off the cliff again in April?
I think, yes, I do believe that. I think they will continue it. I think they'll be foolish not to. However, at the moment, it has put a real sort of a sting up the bottoms of those that want to get on with it and saying, look, there's a saving to be made. So in a way, they're rushing to try and do the sales, get the matters exchanged prior to when the stamp duty changes again. However, we're coming to a spring market when the next budget will come, or prior to that, instead of March, April. And so at that point, it is the case of whether the incumbent government turns around and says, well, actually, we need to continue this if it does show that it's going to fall off the edge. I don't really believe it's going to fall off the edge either way, primarily because it's that time of the year when house people start to, think about moving. Springtime is there, and if you've got to move, you're going to move. But yes, obviously, every penny counts, as they say. So when you look at the difference it would make in terms of the stamp duty for people that are first time buyers, reversing back to the old set of figures, it's going to make a difference. And yes, it could fall off the cliff at that point.
Let's move on to our other story that we're going to look at this weekend, and this is quite interesting actually. Britain's poshest suburbs. Now, I didn't realise that things like stamp duty can actually affect people's behaviour. I suppose it's obvious when you think about it, but a decade ago, the then Chancellor George Osborne overhauled the stamp duty system, penalising families buying larger homes in expensive areas. So they moved out to find value in affordable up-and-coming suburbs and commuter towns. Experts believe that this next year, 2025, there will be another push towards the suburbs due to pent-up demand from families wanting to buy bigger homes. Savills is forecasting a swell in mortgaged homeowners moving house. They predict that the second and third steppers are going to increase by 26% or 70,000 per year over the next 5 years. The suburbs are likely to be the core focus for these buyers. This will be driven by stabilised political conditions following the election and the establishment of a new government, and bolstered by the expectations of slow but steadily falling interest rates. New research from Savills has revealed the most affluent suburbs across the country. These are areas with the highest number of households with the biggest mortgages. This reflects high earnings and high house prices, but does not include where local housing markets are dominated by investors or cash buyers or second home owners. So let's reveal, there they all are. There's the top 10 on the screen. There's Herne Hill, top of the list. The average house price in Herne Hill right now, £1,666,094. And the average salary for that is 149. This is the household income, I might add, £149,525. Quite a nice place to live, I would suspect, Joe, but at 1.666, that's some serious mortgage payments each month.
It is, and also equally, not only just a good home, but a great investment for the future. You know, if that area is based on that demand, supply and demand, and all the other communications that I've touched on and spoken about, you will know that it's an area that is popular for families, especially when there is good schooling in the area. That is a big marker nowadays. And knowing that the incumbent government sort of putting VAT on private schools, good state schools and grammar schools, etc., are getting a great looking. And so I think not surprising that Herne Hill is right up there in the league.
Yes, it's long been overshadowed by its noisier neighbour, Brixton, of course, but it's quietly blossomed over the last 20 years. All of these areas, and we'll just touch on them briefly, these pockets and little areas have big family homes and are close to buzzy high streets full of great restaurants, independent delis and wine bars. There's a green space nearby, and they've got good schools, as you say, on the doorstep. And these are Britain's most sought-after neighbourhoods. So the next one along is Between the Commons. So this is the Commons where, let me see if I can find out where they are. 1 second, I'm just looking down my notes here. South Circular, Trinity Road and Balham High Road, dubbed Between the Commons, Clapham Common, Wandsworth Common and Tooting Beck. So that's where that is. The 1.652 there, and an average salary of 174,152. And then in Brook Green, 1.2 million. And 147,000 for the average household income. Banbury in London, 1.2 million and 135,000. And then moving out into Cambridge, that's the next one, Newnham, interestingly, 1.143 million there, 104,000. And also Oxford comes in the list, I notice, as well at 1.3 million, 115,000. South Hampstead at 1 million and 107,000. But then you notice when you come out to Bristol, Solihull and Nottingham, dramatic drop, almost half price. So the desirable areas in Bristol, 748,000 for a home there, just under 700,000 for Solihull, and Nottingham 550,000. But the salaries, interestingly, not so dramatically dropped. 124,000 in Bristol, Solihull 139 and 112 for Nottingham. So you really are paying premium to be in central London, aren't you?
Absolutely, and that's as we've covered and said that it's about the communications and what they want, and all the added bonuses, the leafy roads that are there. I'm not saying that the commons are going to be the leafy roads, but their accessibility and communication and getting into central and not going perhaps going into central, but the schooling is good. All of those things are the deciding factors of this particular league table, and any league table in property is based on majority of those things that we talk and cover about. And it's interesting that, when you say Bristol, it almost drops down to half the money, but it's even at half the money, it's still, an expensive place to live. But the reason why it's half the money is because the amount of demand for the families that may want to reassess their situation now don't need to be in the city, but want to be a little bit closer to the coast, have halfway house. Places like Bristol are very, very attractive.
Yeah, and one thing that's in common with all of these is that they kind of replicate village life in a microcosm within a big city. Every one of them's got a little sort of high street and independent shops and areas where people can congregate. So it's people that want to stay in the city but get that village life, I guess.
Yeah, and the village life, and I mean, we go back to the search box where they talked about cottages. People still like the idea of that leafy grove, leafy streets, quiet villages, quaint cafes, all of that that feeling of community in a way. They want to be part of that community. It's not really gone away. I mean, in spite of all of the flats that are built up in the cities and so forth, people still crave to go out to places like, the outskirts of London where they are. I mean, I would say something like Notting Hill, for example. Notting Hill is a really nice. I mean, you don't think about it, and you look at it from the film, but when you actually walk through Notting Hill, for argument's sake, it's got some cute little, coffee shops, restaurants, and that feel of community where somebody might walk past and you actually might know them, as opposed to being in that sort of fast Piccadilly life where
Mm.
everybody is at such a pace that they don't even look above their phone because they're still trying to find the direction to wherever they've got to go. So the whole thing is very very different. You have more people. It's like bumping cars on a fairground. All you get is people bumping into each other and cursing you and giving you bad looks because you bumped into, because they haven't been bothered to look up to see where they're going. Whereas in places like Notting Hill, a bit further out, they actually probably don't bother looking at the phone so much and might look at the bijou cafes, and nice boutiques, and might even look in their shop windows.
They have staff to look at their phone for them. That's the point.
Ah,
Anyway, we haven't been blown away by Storm Dara today, and if we haven't been blown away by it by the time next week comes, we'll be back with another Property Matters. We'll see you then.